The HomeTech podcast is supported by you. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support. This is the HomeTech podcast for Friday, January 17th, 2020. From Sarasota, Florida, I'm Seth Johnson.
And from Denver, Colorado, I'm Jason Griffin. How you doing, Seth?
Pretty good, man. Hey, if I came to you with a project, I needed about 60 shades, 200, maybe 100 or more lighting devices. What would be your first thought for a control system?
I can tell you what it wouldn't be.
Maybe after tonight it might be different.
That's right. I think this week's show will change my mind, certainly for the right client.
So yeah, HomeKit would probably not be on the front of your mind if somebody came in the door. But we had Andrei, I'm going to try it, Gorbatiuc on, who has put together a project for a client that it's been floating around on the internet, and I reached out to Andrei and got him on the show for a project tonight. And man, this thing is wild. It is for an office up in Washington, I believe, and it's all HomeKit.
Yeah, and stay tuned for that, because it's really interesting to hear Andrei talk about really pushing HomeKit to, I would say, the outer bounds of certainly of what most of us think it's capable of, and it sounds like it's performing really well. And there are certainly some caveats and some things about the scope of the project and certainly the users involved with the project that made HomeKit a good fit. But really just a interesting backstory. HomeKit went into the client's home first. The client had an office, really liked the experience they were having at home, and here you are now with a really cool office, all fitted out with HomeKit, a bunch of Lutron shades, lighting, things of that nature. So really enjoyed chatting with Andrei. Andrei's from a company called NoKang up there in the Portland, Washington area, and he mainly focuses on networks and surveillance and things of that nature, but he started to get into doing some of these automation projects with HomeKit, and sounds like it's worked out really well for him. So again, stay tuned for that. We've got a few headlines we're going to hit before we get into that interview. Seth, what do you say we jump into those?
Let's do it.
For the better part of a decade, the world has waited for SpaceX to deliver on its promise to provide high-speed internet from outer space, actually from inner space, some sort of space. The wait is finally over. Broadband satellite internet is here, or will be before the year is out. On Monday evening, January 6th, SpaceX successfully launched its second, quote, official, end quote, Starlink mission, carrying 60 satellites into orbit aboard a Falcon 9 rocket. This is in addition to 115 operational satellites put into orbit on previous launches. This is all from Motley Fool, fool.com website here. Company has about 175 of these now, and it says, assuming SpaceX continues putting satellites in orbit at a rate of 60 per launch, and doesn't attempt to accelerate that, which it might, 11 more Starlink missions should suffice to surpass the 800 satellite threshold for, quote, moderate internet coverage.
It's wild to think about. You just need 800 of those satellites floating around up there, and you'll get internet coverage at that point. That's crazy.
It is.
Here we are, though. This is happening. Like, I don't think people realize this is. I know people don't realize this is happening. This is kind of why I keep an eye. Well, I totally keep an eye on like the space news, because this last launch that went up the other day on January 6th, I actually could see from my house. It was a clear night. I walked out into the middle of the street. It's kind of over one of my neighbor's house. There's a big tree in the way, but if I get out into the street, I can see it go up, and I can kind of see part of the reentry burn come back down. So it was cold. I watched it go up. Came back in, watched it come back down. Didn't want to stay outside in the cold.
Very cool. Yeah, it says this should reach the goal by the end of June 2020. By the end of the year, Starlink's in orbit should reach 1,500.
Wow.
They've got, over time, plans to launch possibly as many as 42,000. Granted, this is a long-term stretch goal, according to the story.
Yeah,
it'll be really interesting to keep an eye on this story as it develops. 42,000.
42,000. There's a lot of press. I was kind of reading through some of the interesting comments and hot takes that people are having on this, but it seems like they are, we are definitely getting the what Elon Musk filter on this, I guess is probably the best way of saying it, where he's saying, oh, we're going to get super fast gigabit internet and it's going to be like in the 10 millisecond range, which is kind of what we're looking at for 5G here on Earth. So it will be interesting to see what the internet speeds are, and more importantly, what the pricing is going to be for this gigabit internet when it comes out, possibly later this year. If they do get 1,500 of them in orbit by the end of 2020, they could be ready to flip a switch, and we might see a competitor for a lot of the broadband services here. Broadband, I should put broadband in quotes, right? Because a lot of people don't have it. But we should see a competitor for a lot of the ISPs here in the States, but not only in states, around the world, and also in places that like don't have high-speed internet coverage here, at least here in this country and throughout the world, like in rural areas where the lines aren't laid. This would be a great thing to have. I'm thinking like lake houses and that kind of thing. Like a lot of times you can't get internet out there, but this would just come from the heavens, right? So it should be really interesting to I think this is going to be one of those game changer things that I don't think a lot of people really understand. Even if it only works slightly better than like the current version of satellite, it's still slightly better than the current version of satellite internet, and that's a whole lot better than what people get right now.
Right. Agreed.
Well, Jason, I have some sad news. Hosts of Spectrum subscribers are about to learn the risks of tying your home security to your telecom provider. The Charter-owned company has notified its customers that it will stop supporting its Spectrum home security service on February 5th. When that happens, the system will pretty much be useless. Individual devices still should work, but the core monitoring services and the remote device access will all go away.
Oof.
Kind of, yeah. That's and people paid money for that. I mean, this is one of those things. It's like you would think a company like Charter or Comcast or Spectrum, like when they offer something that it's a safe bet, right? Like your cable box just doesn't suddenly stop working and you have no recourse. Why would my my security system that I bought from them stop working and have no recourse?
Right. Yeah, and they are not offering refunds on this. I know for the most part, I think when you get security services from a company like this, I don't think you're paying a ton of money for the hardware. I think these companies, your upfront costs are pretty low, but I don't know. I could be totally wrong about how Spectrum approached this. Either way, they are not offering refunds. They're offering promotional deals from Abode or Ring, minus the subscriptions, so I guess just hardware, as compensation. The company did first alert customers back in December, so last month. Story goes on to talk about how these promotional offers won't really help customers who spent, the money outfitting their homes, but I think we're talking probably in the hundreds, certainly not in the high thousands, I would imagine, for most of these customers. So a bummer all the same.
Yeah, it still hurts no matter what price point. If you bought something and it's perfectly fine, and then the company shuts down and it stops working, it's still going to hurt.
The inconvenience too, for sure. Like the time you now have to spend to go refigure all this stuff out is it's a bummer. So you wonder what's behind Spectrum's decision and how much of it has to do with just the continual downward pricing pressure being brought to bear by companies like Ring and Abode and a host of others.
And I also wonder what like their service contracts were like, and how their equipment was holding up over time. Maybe it was just losing too much money and costing them too much in keeping a cable technician out at your house setting up security. That can't be if you have. That can't be an easy transition for these cable companies to make. Who, I spent all day the other day dealing with a cable technician who just refused to tone any wires, and I'm like, no, you put your toner on that wire there, and then walk into that closet over there with all those wires and find the cable. And he's like, well, I found the cable that goes from the garage to that closet. It must be the same wire, and like I just couldn't get it across to him that no, the bonus room is not the garage. I don't know, but like these are the people they trust for their home security. I don't get it, but that's the way of the world right now.
Yeah, and I know security at doing these things at a large scale is traditionally a really debt intensive business, and these companies, again, they're offering this at typically very low upfront pricing, and their whole model is predicated on keeping clients around and making that money up over a long time. So there's a long-term horizon for these companies to do it. Maybe Spectrum just lost their appetite for it.
Right.
All right, well, moving on here to our final headline before we jump into our project interview with Andrei.
Speaking of losing appetites.
Yeah. Well, I'll reserve judgment, but Domotz, I always forget how it's properly pronounced, but Domotz sent out an email this week detailing a series of changes to their pricing and plan policies. According to the email, quote, "As the majority of our new installations now take place on our premium plan, we have decided to make it our standard and only offering. We will deprecate the light and advanced monitoring plans as of February 3rd, 2020. Pricing of the premium plan will not change. It is $19 per month." It does go on in the email to say that all of your existing active agents will be grandfathered in and will remain at their current pricing level, so you won't see any changes on those. Any Domotz agents activated after February 3rd will only be available on the $19 premium plan offering.
I think the D is silent, so it's like Omotz, right? Like Django.
I don't think so, Seth.
I don't know. We'll find out one day. Yeah, so do you want me to read between the lines here? Like, this seems to me that Domotz is exiting the CI business and going for that full, IT MSP market. Because the features that they announced in this email too, they have nothing to do with what residential installers would need. Like, they are nice, but like it wasn't anything on here like a new dashboard for sophisticated reporting features. That's really not what we're trying to get into. Like, we just need those high level notifications that a system is having a problem. PSA tool and ticketing systems integrations. I don't know. Doesn't really seem like many integrators I know have access to those. And network devices configuration, versioning, and management. So yeah, I don't know too many integrators that are managing fleets of PCs, or access points where they would have to update firmware and roll back firmware from across all sites at once. But maybe there are, and I'm just ignorant of them at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to take kind of the opposite side on this one, I think, in the sense that I won't dispute that some of these features do appear to be more MSP centric. We've known this about Domotz for a while, though. I mean, residential isn't their only play. They're involved in other verticals, and I certainly don't fault them for that. I think that makes all the sense in the world. Where I would take the opposite side from you is on some of these where on the assertion that maybe these aren't interesting or compelling features for an integrator. I think certainly we're painting with broad strokes, and integrators come in a million shades of gray as a profession, like any other profession. But I think that, largely these sorts of things like more sophisticated reporting, better intelligence and insights into network behavior, without knowing more specifically what those are, it's hard to say exactly how helpful, but I think there are. I suspect many integrators, I know many that I talk to in my day-to-day work at OneVision, who are looking for better, for RSM to kind of make that next leap. What more can we do with this versus those higher level notifications that you referred to? And then certainly on the software integration side, PSA, for those who may not be familiar, professional services automation software, ticketing systems. Again, without knowing the specifics of what they're looking to develop, it's a little bit hard to say exactly how useful, but I see a real need every day for integrators as a whole. Again, forgive the very broad strokes that we're using here, but integrators as a whole to get more on the bus of using things like business software and professional services automation and ticketing, definitely things that I would put into that camp. And then the versioning and management, configuration of big, as you call them, fleets of sort of network devices and stuff. Yeah, maybe limited to the high end. That seems more useful for business MSP type of models, but certainly can't hurt in the residential space.
Yeah, I don't think better tooling is a bad thing. If you have a device and the next day it gets a software update and it's got better integrations with things, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. But I think if you look at the like overall checklist of what their competitors in the MSP IT market have, and then what Domotz has, like if you look at that, side by side, you might find that they were lacking these features, and by integrating with these ticketing tools and providing more sophisticated reporting features and that kind of thing, they get those little green check marks back in their box for what is still, even at $19 per month, it's no $3 a month, but even at $19 a month, it's still a very, very disruptive, pricing for that particular type of device. And I was kind of being hyperbolic in the chat room this morning, saying this is the end of Domotz in residential. It's not. Like if you're doing your job as an integrator and doing what you find folks over there at OneVision have put together, like $19, you're going to build that into your packaging and sell that to the customer as part of the package, the monitoring type thing, the package plan that you're going to do. $19 isn't going to be any different than a price of $19 isn't going to be any different than a price of $3, right? So it's and if it gives you more insight into what's going on when there's a problem, it's going to be worth it. So I think that it's still going to hang around, but the big elephant in the room that no one has mentioned here is that their competitor in our space is free. Like Oversea is free, and I'm not even going to mention the other two that don't exist anymore because the same company owns them, and I'm sure they are out there. But the writing is clearly on the wall. Like Oversea is the future for our industry, and everybody will be either heading there or paying for something like Domotz in the future, because there's nothing else exists. Everything else was bought up by Control4, and then Control4 was bought by SnapAV. So the nearest competitor, even going from $3 to $0, like it's clear to me that our industry was interested in the $0 price point. And yes, I'm painting with those. Yeah, I don't think there's thousands of shades. There's only 50 shades of gray that we can talk about. And if I'm painting with that, fair. then there's I see that there's the integrators who find value in something like this and will pay the $19 a month, and then there's the integrators who don't and will just continue to use the simple basic tools that Oversea can give them, and maybe they're using that in a complex manner. I don't know, but they'll go down that route too. So it's a win-win. But unfortunately, I do think this is kind of like a pivot point that we can't ignore. That Domotz is targeting those a different market, and we're going to see those features and pricing be aimed at that market for disruption, just like it was for our market early on. Right.
Well, time will tell. I think that what you're seeing, Domotz is going to continue to try to carve out a little niche, get the features in place that they think will differentiate them, and they from just a footprint perspective may indeed not be able to maybe their strategy isn't to try to go up against Oversea. Maybe it is to carve out a niche, and then again, I don't know a lot about what they're doing in other verticals, but I know they are active in other verticals.
If you were skimming along by the pricing at $3 a month, just say that's their startup pricing, right? I mean, we all know what that is, right? That was going to go away eventually. But if they're making money now at $19 a month, and how many of those $19 accounts do you need to make up for the $3 accounts that you missed out on? Well, not too many. Those $19 account, they're going to pay for a whole lot more than a $3 account is, right? So,
right.
Like if you look at the profit margin that they're going from and then to, I think they're going to be in a healthy position, because clearly they've thought this through. Like they are trying to disrupt a completely. I mean, you go look at the other guys on in that space, and you're looking at like $70 a site, or per agent you're going to pay $70 or $80 a month. So like it's a completely different world, and I think they're going to be able to get in there and disrupt that too.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on either way. So we'll definitely continue to monitor that. That'll do it for our headlines here. All the links and topics that we've discussed on this week's episode can be found in our show notes at HomeTech.fm/2 /287. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter, which includes weekly show reminders as well as other occasional updates about all the great things going on here in the world of home tech. Once again, that's HomeTech.fm /287.
And don't forget, you can join us in our happy little chat room over there live Wednesday, starting sometime between 7:30. Tonight, a little bit later, because we had an interview. You can find out more at HomeTech.fm /live or following us over on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go ahead then and jump into our interview. Again, we had Andrei Gorbatiuc. Small correction. I think that's the pronunciation. Gorbatiuc.
Verified.
Verified. Exactly. Join us again to talk about a really interesting HomeKit installation. So we hope you enjoy the conversation. Hey, Andrei, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. We're looking forward to diving into this. I understand that this installation that we're going to talk about, this is a really special episode of our project, because I understand this installation we're about to talk about is the largest, I think you told me before, as we were getting prepped, the largest HomeKit installation in the world. And that's a pretty cool claim to fame. I know that you said this has gone a little bit viral and was sort of unexpected on your end. So we're going to get in. We're going to talk all about that. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. But before we do that, why don't you give our listeners just a quick personal introduction, give them your name, talk about where you're located, and a little bit about your company as well.
So I live in Portland, Oregon. Originally, I'm from Moldova, which is a small country between Ukraine and Romania. I live here 4 years now, I believe, something like that. I have a small company, like 2 people here, me and my wife. That's it.
Yep.
And we do a lot of stuff, commercial, residential, automation, lighting, networking, Wi-Fi, security, surveillance.
All right. Well,
everything.
Very cool. So you've got a small company there in Portland, and understand you went out and did this installation, and again, like I alluded to, didn't really expect it to be such a big deal, but it's kind of caught on, got people talking a little bit. So let's just start at the beginning and talk about the client, your relationship with the client. Give us some of the backstory about what led specifically to the conversations around this project moving in the direction of HomeKit, and then we'll get into some specifics about what the project is.
So I've done for this client a project. He built a house, so his house was full with Control4 stuff, and he wasn't happy with all that installation. Actually, the install itself was good. The programming was okay. He wasn't happy with user interface. He wasn't happy with paying monthly fee. He wasn't happy that he wasn't able to adjust some rules, automations and stuff. And I showed him this, DIY HomeKit solution on my phone. And he was like, wow, I want that. So we downshift that his whole project to HomeKit, and he's happy right now. He's extremely happy. It's nothing special about that project. Some shades, some Lutron cassette dimmers, Apple TVs, nothing special in that project. And he was building this new office, and he asked me if it will be possible to do HomeKit in the office. And that office is big. I think, 16,000 square feet, 66 shades, And I was like, wow, that's big. So everything must be reliable. So I decided to go with Lutron Radio Rad 2, which is probably the most suitable solution for this particular project. I didn't want to go with Wi-Fi switches and, all that stuff. And it works great, and they are really, really happy. The only problem we have, those Apple ID verifications, those iPads in walls, they constantly ask you to some ID verification, upgrading, and all that stuff. But everything else is perfect.
Right. Very cool. Well, yeah, I can imagine that was that was a really interesting conversation when he first broached the idea or brought up the idea of doing HomeKit in such a large environment. And kudos to you for jumping in and doing it. It sounds like it's worked out well. Let's give our listeners a taste before we jump into some of the specific design considerations, and we'll come back to some of those challenges that you alluded to. Let's give our listeners a little bit of a feel for the size of this project. So run us through give us a quick overview of the numbers on your device list there. What all do you have going on in this project?
So we have commercial lights there, and the only way to control them is to use dimming modules, 0 to 10 volts. So we used around 100 of those. We use 66 shades, which is individually controllable. So everybody in the office, they can control their own light. They can control their own shade. I don't know, a lot of Pico remotes. We didn't use in-wall dimmers or switches. We used only radio Pico remotes for shades and for lights. 6 in-wall iPads, 6 HomePods for music, for Siri, 5 TVs, Apple TVs. And regarding networking, there's Unify system with router XG, 10 gig optical core switch, 148 port switch mainly for internet, the network access and powering low voltage devices such as Lutron controllers, repeaters, and such. Why I decided to go with this solution, I like to be in control of power of my low voltage devices. In case of a problem, I'm able to restart that device from here, from my home, every low voltage device in the system. And several 10 gig switches for access points, Wi-Fi access points, they also 10 gig, incoming port 10 gig. It's some cameras, full HD, 4K, and that's it.
I was doing the math on, I think I got the math. You said there was 100 lighting devices, right?
Yeah.
So 100 lighting devices, 60 some odd shades. I mean, you're close to 200 devices in just the HomeKit stuff alone. That's significant. That's not small.
Exactly. I think there's more than 200 devices.
Very well could be.
HomeKit, because I'm close to limit of Radio RAD 2, which is 200 devices.
Right, yeah. And plus,
iPads and stuff like that.
You alluded to let everybody being able to control their own shade or their light and that kind of thing. I'm guessing that's through the Home app. Because I have the Home app on my home as well. How are you managing the users of that app where they're not like turning on and off the conference room when people are having conferences and that kind of thing?
No, I'm not.
You're not.
No.
You're just expecting adults to be adults.
There's no worry about all that stuff. Those guys are, they programmers, they knowledgeable, they know what they do. So there's no problem with that at all.
That makes sense. So everybody kind of has free reign over this home, so to speak. You can't see me, but I'm putting home in air quotes here. And everybody has the Home app on their phone or their computer, and they can control the environment around them.
I don't think they have. I don't think they care about that. They can they can control all those devices from the iPads, which is involved. So they don't have to have that application on their phone, each of them.
Makes a lot of sense.
I don't think it will be a lot of guests in that Home app, and it will take a lot of time to synchronize all those keychain information between all these. It will be a mess. So it's much easier to use Siri, all those speakers around the office, much easier to use just that.
Yeah, I was going to say the voice control element there, I would think could come into play. You use Siri, and as long as you've got the rooms named in such a way that people can do that logically, that would work. Having those in-wall iPads would work. I agree. I think that's one aspect of, as you think about HomeKit, it sounds like it's working really well for this particular installation. There may be other environments of this size. Of course, people might be listening and thinking, would this work for this project or that project? And certainly that user management aspect is something you have to consider when you put this up against a system like Control4 or Crestron or anything like that. That's obviously going to be a factor for many users. But it sounds like in this particular environment that's been a non-issue.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's get in then to some of the what are some of your favorite parts, I guess, of HomeKit in this? It's about using HomeKit in general and how it works in this particular case for these clients.
You know what? I was surprised by the stability. It just works. It works now for 5 months. 4 or 5 months. No issues at all. HomeKit it's not reliable. It's no response issue all the time. But with Lutron stuff, it just works. No issues at all. I had an issue with this install, and it was a big, huge issue with Wi-Fi. They had dropouts, constant dropouts, first 3 months, and we didn't know what's happening. We fixed that, and the problem was in the coupler. Those patch panels. I like to go with coupler, RG45 to RG45, and those couplers wasn't certified for 10 gig, but the network was 10 gig. So this was the main concern, main issue in this whole setup.
Yeah, it's important to have products and just products in general that you can have a good foundation. Good reliable products will shine no matter what kind of, like, you can use a Lutron system. It's a great product. You can use Lutron Caseta. You could use RA2. It's a well-rounded product line that's well respected in the industry, and you can use it just about anywhere you need to without worrying about it, right? So it's always good to have that foundation that you can just stand on and then like sprinkle whatever control system you want to use right on top of it. So that makes a lot of sense. And believe me, I've had crazy network issues too. And you never know what little $5 part's gonna come back to haunt you. So I can totally understand that. If that's the only pain points you had, like what were some of the unique issues you ran into during the install that, like, since you've done other integrations with other control systems and that kind of thing, what was something unique that you came across that you found really easy to do with this project that maybe like a non-DIY type setup would have been a little more friction involved there?
The whole project was actually easy to do because they asked me to automate to do controllable just the lighting and the shades. That's it. There's nothing else. Usually we're doing Control4, you integrate all those players, receivers, cameras, and stuff. And here are just lights and shades. That's it. So, I don't know. And the biggest thing, it's a user interface.
Mm-hmm.
The Control4, it's a great system. It's reliable, but for my taste, the user interface just not user friendly.
Right.
Just in people, I saw a lot of people who with broken remotes, those Control4 remotes, those are broken because they got mad and just smacked those. People don't like those remotes. They are not user friendly.
Yeah.
Get something like, with Siri remote, with Apple TV remote, four buttons, and you can control whole house. It's so much easier to use. I think it's a future. The HomeKit is not reliable now, but it will be someday, and it will replace all this, URC, Control 4, Savant, everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously a big sort of ongoing conversation in the industry about what do systems like HomeKit mean for the quote unquote traditional control companies operating in the space. And there's certainly a whole rabbit hole and whole entire conversation you could have around that. But, Seth and I have talked about it numerous times on the show, and the framework, the overall approach that Apple is taking with HomeKit in the way that they're setting it up, Seth and I think both agree is really promising. And as far as, looking out into the future of which of these systems, Google, Amazon, Apple, which of these systems is kind of best positioned to really move into that really reliable, control space that's currently occupied only by companies like Crestron and Control4. I would agree HomeKit is definitely the best position for that, and the others are more staying a little bit in a different sandbox, so to speak. I think coming back to the project, and projects always look really different when you're done with them than they do at the beginning, and there's always lessons that you learn and things that you take away from doing an installation. And I would have to imagine definitely one like this, where you're kind of pushing a system like HomeKit to its outer limits of really what it's built for. What, in hindsight, looking back, is there any specific or general sort of ideas or lessons about HomeKit and how users interact with it that you wish you would have known then? Things you know now that you wish you would have known before the project started?
Doing this project, I had experience with HomeKit, before, so I knew a lot of stuff. I've learned a lot of mistakes doing HomeKit, but not on this install. On this install, believe me or not, but everything was so smooth, and everything just works like it was designed. But before that, I was trying to use some Wi-Fi stuff, switches, and just it didn't work. Not reliable.
This is clearly a pro install too. I don't know if you've said this before. I've had to duck in and out right now, this afternoon for my daughter. But how long did this install take, start to finish?
1 month.
Very cool.
Got it. And I think the $1 million question here is commercial project of this sort of nature. Given this experience, what would your decision-making process look like? Maybe what sort of questions would you ask a client? I'm thinking of somebody out there who might be listening to the show, thinking about, hey, I've got this future project and it sounds like HomeKit worked really well. What is the sort of thought process that you would go through if you had another client say, hey, maybe I read about this installation, I'm thinking HomeKit would be a great fit? How do you start to vet and understand if this really is going to be the right solution for them?
The limit, I would say, how many devices? My first question, how many devices? The next step, if we're talking about Lutron, because the Lutron is the only company who can do reliable stuff with HomeKit adaptation. The next step from RadioRA 2 is HomeWorks QS. But HomeWorks QS is so expensive. First of all, it's for home, not for office spaces, and it's so expensive. The suitable probably system for office, Crestron or Lutron Vive, which is not compatible with HomeKit. So I would ask how many devices. If under 200, probably I would go again with RadioRA 2 and HomeKit, because it's so easy to use. It just works. First of all, it works and really easy to use. Again, if he needs something more than lights and shades, then probably the right way is to go with Crestron or something, because you can integrate reliably. Even sound and TVs, you cannot. Here, this situation, Apple people, they have only Apple computers, laptops. So in conference room, they are using AirPlay for streaming presentations. So they didn't care about compatibility, and using Windows computers. But in other cases, if you have Windows and, probably HomeKit is not right solution. So I don't know. It depends of the client, what's he like, how many devices, how much money he has, and everything.
Yep, that's the job of being an integrator is figuring out what products and match what client at what budget. I mean, that's what we do day in and day out. To figure out the needs, assess them, and find the right solution. In this case, you had a pretty techie crowd that can deal with any issue, probably that comes up with HomeKit, and understand what it is. And the next, another client may run into an issue with HomeKit not responding or something crazy like that, and just kind of freak out. So, I run HomeKit at my house, and from time to time it says not responding, and I turn the phone off, or not turn the phone off. I just kind of close the screen or whatever, come back to it, and it works. I don't know why, but I know that I have clients out there that would flip out if something like that happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all about finding the needs and assessing them and getting the right product in the hands that's gonna cause you the least amount of problems later on. So what's next over? Go ahead and plug your company a little bit and tell us what's next. What's next on the horizon for you?
Home automation is not my main thing at my company. I usually do networking, Wi-Fi, and surveillance. I have a lot of projects regarding these particular Wi-Fi and networking stuff and cameras and etc.
Cool. Well, we appreciate you coming on. It sounds like you've gotten a little bit of internet fame with this large HomeKit installation. We appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit about it. And I hope that all great things come to your business. It sounds like you found a nice niche with this HomeKit stuff when the home automation needs do arise. And so again, thank you for coming on and sharing that with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that'll do it for our interview with Andrei. Again, we hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was really cool to learn about HomeKit and really what it's capable of. And I would have never...
Not me.
I probably wouldn't have been brave enough to try. But to think that many devices, and it sounds like it's all functioning really well. It's great.
Yeah, 200 HomeKit devices in a commercial environment. That's a risky play, but he seems to be working out for him and his client, which is the more important part.
All right. Well, moving on here. No mailbag this week, but Seth, we've got another great pick of the week. I'll hand it over to you here to tee this one up.
So a little old, but I have some additional kind of information on it. But the headline is what caught my attention. The Apple TV remote is so bad that a Swiss TV company developed a normal replacement, and it's kind of funny. This remote is we've talked about these overseas where cable companies, instead of making their own cable boxes, they would make an app and stick it on an Apple TV and pass that out to their client as the cable box, right? So if you go to this French it is a Swiss company called Salt. If you get your TV from them, you get an Apple TV, and you can buy this optional remote, which costs about $20. And it looks very similar to an Apple TV remote. It is not the Apple TV remote in one big respect, Jason. All hard buttons.
Yeah.
All hard buttons.
Yeah, it's actually pretty slick looking. I wouldn't be opposed.
It's a little bit bigger than the Apple remote. I've seen some like side by sides of these, but it's got like a full D-pad, like up, down, left, right, OK button. The menu button up is kind of up at the top, and it's like has a little white circle, kind of to mimic the Apple TV remote a little bit. But overall, it looks pretty good. Now, what I did find out about this is that there's a lot of like in this article that was dated back in December 9th from The Verge, they're saying that, they got permission from Apple to do this. What I did find out is that this is a remote that is just an IR remote. So it has nothing to do with getting, you don't get permission to Apple to use, like we do that every day, right? We use the IR commands. So while I think it's handy, it's no like Bluetooth integration, which would be a little bit nicer. And the biggest problem with this is that once you get over to a keypad to type in a show to search, there's no Siri integration. So you are going back old school and typing it in one character at a time with that D-pad, which is definitely no fun.
A treat.
You don't have Siri. Yeah. So it doesn't have Bluetooth integration. What we really want is one that has Siri built in. We basically just want the Apple TV remote with hard buttons instead of the swipey thing. And then you have the Siri where you can yell into it and type stuff in with your voice. I think that'd be perfect. But we don't have that. We have the little remote that we had to go out and buy bumpers for because they get lost.
So some trade-offs here, but kind of cool all the same. Could be a good, inspiration for other simple products like this if you're not a huge fan of the Apple TV remote. I know I'm not. We're bigger fans now that we got that the rubber bumper kit that you turned me on to.
That was a good pick.
That's helped, but cool. Well, if you have any feedback, questions, comments, picks of the week, or ideas for a show topic or guest, give us a shout. Our email address is feedback@HomeTech.fm, or visit HomeTech.fm/feedback and fill out the online form.
And we want to give a big thank you to everyone who supports the show, but especially those who are able to financially support the show through our Patreon page. If you don't know how to our Patreon page, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support to learn how you can support Home Tech for as little as $1 a month. Any pledge over $5 a month gets you a shout out on the show, but every pledge gets you an invite to our private Slack chat at the Hub, where you and other supporters of the show can gather every day to talk about bumpers for your Apple TV remote. There's a lot of conversation going over here that I'm trying to keep out of my field of vision because it's kind of funny. So, thanks, guys. Thanks for making me laugh through that.
Yeah. Get your minds out of the gutter there in the chat room tonight. You'll have to join us live if you want in on the fun next week. If you're looking for other ways to support the show other than financially, we would really appreciate a review on iTunes or on the podcast app of your choice. Please take a minute to do that. It helps other people find the show. And again, we would really appreciate it.
And Home Tech is a proud member of the Technology.fm collective of podcasts. Over there, you can find other great shows like Home On, The Smart Home Show, and DTNS. That's Technology.fm.
Absolutely. All right, Seth. Well, that'll do it. Another episode of the Projects in the book. Project.
It's hard to say.
The books.
we were going to come up with a better title for that segment. We just never could.
Just took on a life of its own.
Creative, yeah.
That's right. All right. Well, have a great weekend, and we'll chat with you next week.
You too. Have a good weekend.
All right. Take care.